So we are now coming to the last session, concluding our seminar. I'm very glad to have and honored to have our panelists on board to comment and to bring their views on what should be the next step. How can we further, let's say, complete this practical implementation of the Aarhus Convention? I must say for my own that having heard all the different presentations that we have since the 3 days, I can see that when I try to remember the situation in 2013, we are now much more advanced with, of course, completely different pictures according to the institutional setting in each country. But at the same time, there is a sort of a common vision that is emerging. I'm very happy to see that we have concrete proposals, concrete projects. This idea of not only of engaging people, let's say, but also having lay people, CSX, bringing their experts to enter the game, to participate actively, and this idea that it could be a fruitful collaboration. It's not, we are not talking here of an adversarial process, but much more with the idea to bring people with different views. They could be, let's say, they can have, it's without prejudice to their position vis-a-vis the nuclear energy, but in general, they are all aiming at, let's say, contributing to whatever is the decision in their country to achieve and maintain safety over time and to solve the main problems that we have to deal with. So we are numerous people from representing a varied panel of actors around the table, and I will follow the list that I have under the arm, and I will start with Jan Haverkamp. Jan Haverkamp has brilliantly chaired one session in this seminar. I guess you all know him as a senior nuclear energy and energy policy expert within Greenpeace. Now living in the Netherlands after being 20 years, more than 20 years in the Czech Republic. And now, let's say, with this long and rich background of a campaigner in Central Europe, and also having joined and co-created NTW since 2013. And I think with your background in environmental science and biochemistry, you are all the more, let's say, relevant to bring also the essence of your analysis on what should be the next step in order to complement, pursue this implementation of the Aarhus Convention. So, Jan, I'll give you the floor. May I ask to all the panelists to be as brief as possible, within the limit of 10 minutes, each of you, so that we make sure that we can have a debate at the end together with the other participants.
I had made 3 slides just to give a bit of a reflection on what I've seen over the last 3 days. By the way, this picture shows one of the waste fractions that we will come back upon, which is the transport of waste from enrichment, depleted uranium that is transported from Germany towards Russia nowadays, under the label of resource, and that is one of the issues that we've touched upon. But more important, in the middle you see Rashid Alimov, one of our colleagues who played a very important role in these discussions about radioactive waste, and especially about the role of Russia around radioactive waste. And Alimov, unfortunately, 1.5 months ago, succumbed to COVID-19. And he is a loss to us. He's an enormous loss to us, not only within Greenpeace, in the wider environmental movement. I took this picture just also to remind us that we are depending on on very brilliant people sometimes who will not always be with us. Can I have the next slide, which is the most important slide of my presentation? There were 5 points that I took out of the, Gilles, you said that I chaired one session. It was a session that contained 6 hours or over 6 hours of discussion. It was quite a lot of ground we've covered from the different countries. There are 5 points that I picked up from that. The first one is, I think, what is important is that there is still a gap between countries in understanding what public participation is. We had a situation in Germany where we saw a very controversial picture for very many years, and I think slowly the situation there is grasping what public participation can be, and we've seen a complete restart in order to have public participation being a part of the entire decision process. On the other hand, we've also seen the example of the Czech Republic, where public participation was considered to be information stream from experts towards the public, and the public not really having a voice in that entire project. Now that gap between understanding of public participation is still alive and well all over the continent. I think Sweden was the first country to really set a pace. We now see things moving in Germany. We see conflicts about it in France, in Belgium, and we see an upcoming frustration in countries like Hungary or the Czech Republic. And I'm very curious what will come out of it, but we need to keep that into account. The second point is the history. We've seen in several countries a reset of the entire process because the process was running stuck because of lack of public participation. We've seen Germany. We've seen now also a reset in, to some extent, in France. We see a reset in Belgium. What is important for me, a conclusion important for me, is that those resets need to accept the historical mistakes. And I think that reality overtook us there in Germany, where Gorleben as a potential site fell out on geological arguments. But until that moment, even the reset ran the risk of crashing because of the fact that the hurt, the pain from Gorleben was still on the table. And I see something similar happening in for instance, France. A third point is mentioned also by several questioners. What is the role of strategic environmental assessments? First of all, there's an obligation for strategic environmental assessments if nuclear waste plans are made, but not all countries have carried them out. And the central question there is also, what is the role of transboundary assessment in these programs, and later also for environmental impact assessments. The fourth point is, of course, the elephant in the room that has been mentioned by several people, and that is the role of nuclear power production in the discussion about radioactive waste. Some people have said, well, in countries where there is nuclear power production, there is more understanding of the need and more acceptability of the need for instance, deep geological disposal. My experience is a little bit different there. If I look at the Czech Republic, at France, at Belgium, at the UK, at the Netherlands, I see all countries where, yes, we do have nuclear power, but we do not have a lot of understanding of what has to happen with the waste. On the other hand, we also do not have a lot of understanding of nuclear waste within the debate about nuclear power. And that interaction, I think, needs more attention. The last point was highlighted by David Lowry at a certain moment, and I think is extremely important. That is the role of plutonium and TNORM. Those are two forgotten legacies in the whole process. Plutonium they're both are labeled as potential resources, but we also all know that for the foreseeable future, and then I'm talking for the next few hundred years, all the plutonium we've produced and also all the depleted uranium we've produced in enrichment is not going to be used in other processes at all. And I think that there is a good chance, especially if we try to look over such large stretches of time, we should say, well, for our generation and the coming generations, this is not going to be a resource. This is waste, and we need to treat it as waste, and we need to have plans for it. For plutonium, there are no plans, and we've seen that some countries get rid of the problem by swapping, so getting vitrified waste back for plutonium. But that is, of course, not going to solve the problem. What are we going to do with the plutonium? Are we going to have it laying around, a proliferation risk? Are we going to destabilize it in a way that it cannot be used for weapons production anymore? And then what are we going to do with it then? Those are open questions, and I think it's things that need to be taken up further. Last slide, please, Honorine. That means discussion. There's still a lot to discuss in the coming years, and I'm very happy that we now slowly get into an environment in which there is not only a discussion from a limited group of experts, a limited expert bubble, but that this is a discussion in which all the stakeholders are finding their place and are taking a position in the final decision making that is related to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan. Now I would like to introduce Professor Ebbesson, the chair of the Compliance Committee of the Aarhus Convention. I take this opportunity to mention that this roundtable started in 2008, was since the beginning in partnership with the Aarhus Convention Secretariat, which has very much supported and enabled us to start this process. And I think I'm very happy to have the opportunity to have Professor Ebbesson as a participant in this panel.
As you are aware, all the provisions of the Aarhus Convention apply in full to nuclear activities, including management of radioactive waste. As regards environmental information, that involves two concomitant aspects. First, of course, the right of members of the public to request environmental information held by public authorities. And the fact that the authorities may only deny access to such information on certain grounds and after having taken into account the public interest served by disclosure. Second, the parties to the convention must ensure that the public authorities process, gather, and update the information relevant to their functions. To that effect, they must establish systems so that there is an adequate flow of information about the proposed and existing activities, including, of course, nuclear activities. The provisions for public participation for specific activities, plans, programs, and policies are also fully applicable in the area of nuclear activities, which pertains also to the management of nuclear wastes. This includes all minimum requirements for notification and opportunities to voice concerns, and the obligation of the parties to ensure that these comments are duly taken into account. Third, the provision for access to justice are relevant and fully applicable with respect to nuclear activities and nuclear waste management. All this, of course, you already knew, but I needed to give that as a bit of a background. What some of you may be less informed about is the jurisprudence of the Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee with respect to nuclear activities. And all these cases, but one, have been considered because members of the public have brought communications to the committee alleging non-compliance. And in most of these cases, the Compliance Committee have found the parties not to comply with the convention. To understand the relevance of the Aarhus Convention for nuclear activities and radioactive waste management, one must also look at other cases, also those that are not particularly focused on nuclear activities. A good example is how to understand when opportunities for public participation must be ensured in processes concerning lifetime extensions. Having said that, the committee has adopted findings in more than 10 cases concerning nuclear activities, and if the party concerned has been found non-compliant, the committee has also made recommendations to the party on how to get in compliance. In addition to these cases, there are currently some 5 pending cases which address in one way or the other nuclear activities. So one of the first cases on nuclear power plant examined, in one of those, the findings were adopted in 2010, and that concerned decisions for activities made already in the 1980s, but where 2 of the reactors had been curtailed. Then, when the new decisions were granted in 2008, the party concerned did not provide for public participation, and according to the committee, these decisions of 2008 amounted to reconsideration and update, and the party concerned should have provided for public participation. The question of reconsideration and update of operating conditions, which has also been heavily discussed in the context of the Espoo Convention, has been subject to such findings and recommendations by the committee. In a recent case, the committee held that the party concerned should have allowed for public participation in the decision-making to extend the lifetime. And in its findings, the committee held that, and I quote, except in cases where a change to the permitted duration is for a minimal time and obviously would have insignificant or no effects on the environment, it is appropriate and thus required for extensions of duration to be subject to the provisions of the Convention. The jurisprudence regarding updates and reconsiderations has also been developed in other activities which did not concern nuclear activities, and the committee held that the opportunities for public participation must be provided when operating conditions are reconsidered or updated, except in cases where the reconsideration or updates is not capable of significantly changing the basic parameters of the activity and will not address significant environmental aspects of the activity. It also stressed in that context that it is not the actual outcome of the reconsideration or update that is determinative. Rather, it is whether the reconsideration or update is capable of changing the activity or address significant aspects. So it is not decisive whether the operating conditions will indeed ultimately be updated or will in fact have significant effects or even bring beneficial effects on environment, human health or safety. What matters is whether the reconsideration or update is capable of changing the activity's basic parameters or will address significant environmental effects to the activity. In addition, the committee has considered more generally whether parties apply with the minimum requirements of the Convention. And in 2 cases, well, indeed 3, the committee has considered transboundary dimensions. The committee has made clear that the parties must ensure opportunities for the public concerned also in other countries when deciding on nuclear activities. These opportunities for transboundary public participation first must meet the requirements of the Convention, and second, must not discriminate. That is, they must not be less favorable for members of the public on the other side of the border than in the state of the activity. In one of them, the committee found that the party concerned was not non-compliance because it had failed to inform members of the public in another country about its decision-making process. Finally, of course, the provisions to ensure that members of the public are not harassed, persecuted, or penalized for exercising the Convention rights apply to nuclear activities. And indeed, in one case where the party concerned was found non-compliant with respect to these provisions of the Convention, it also involved activists protesting against nuclear activities. There are more cases also dealing with these issues, but I won't go through them. Rather, I just wanted to give these examples to show the relevance of the Convention and the readiness of the committee to examine compliance with respect to nuclear activities, including radioactive waste management. The pending cases reveals that there are many aspects to consider and important matters for the parties to ensure. While the committee has not yet examined compliance by the parties with focus on nuclear waste management, I'm sure that this issue will be subject to future communications and examinations. My impression is that there is much greater understanding for the need to ensure public participation in the nuclear community, so to say, today than it was some decades back. I still think there is a lot to do, and I think the Aarhus Convention will remain a source of inspiration, a benchmark, and of course legal requirement to ensure public involvement and participation with respect to nuclear activities, including radioactive waste management, both with respect to inspire policies in other international fora and when the parties to the convention make efforts to comply with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ebbesson. There are lots already of interesting questions, but I will keep them for the debate. Give each of you the opportunity to have your say in the debate, and then we will open the gate to the questions. So may I introduce Mrs. Petrovičová, who is representing DG ENER with a long experience of the functioning of the European Commission, being deputy head of DG ENER 2 and also head of unit. Would you now bring your views on this very question of further implementing the Aarhus Convention and also the way forward as you see it?
Sure, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. So first of all, let me share with all of you my full appreciation for the debate that we have seen here. I indeed think that the role of civil society in the decision-making around matters as complex as the safe and responsible management of spent fuel and radioactive waste is indeed very important. Transparency and public participation can be tackled from different angles and call for an interdisciplinary approach whereby scientific and technical aspects should set the scene against which all other important elements of our societal living must be considered. I did really liked in the previous panel the graph of Mr. Rolig. I think this was a really good illustration. So this kind of working together on this interdisciplinary approach cannot be done without the appropriate involvement of all stakeholders, which includes civil society. Now, as a representative of the European Commission, I'm very glad to see that on substance, we are aligned in the findings that the Commission has brought forward in 2019. As well as the findings of the studies carried out with the help of the colleagues in NTW. This clearly shows that our current focus on the development of key performance indicators to monitor the implementation of the national programs and the legislation under the Waste Directive is indeed the right way forward. And this is not only an indicator meant as a transparency tool towards the implementers themselves, but of course also the public. In the same way, our attention is also on the cost estimations and the financing schemes, which is another area that we found important for improvement. And as we have said also in our presentation on the first day, I think, we have done several studies that are published and available on this topic, and we would welcome feedback on the findings that we mentioned there. Now, looking at inventory of radioactive waste, we indeed need a common language to prepare and present inventories of radioactive waste to increase transparency and to be able to also compare the different aspects and while respecting the national specific situations. In terms of planning, I would like to stress that these elements don't just affect the area of transparency. Indeed, this list could basically be a list for any implementer of radioactive waste, but the overall capacity to plan correctly and enact a safe and responsible management of radioactive waste, I mean, this is all part of the picture. So these elements are extremely important, we think. From the debate of the last few days, we have seen a key element, which I note, is the winning the trust of the public. We have seen also that the gaining trust is a long process requiring a continuous effort from the different stakeholders, not only the member state, the nuclear industry, and all involved. And this can and should indeed happen through multiple channels, from publication of information to conferences and citizen events, indeed, wherever open debate is possible. The dialogue must be on substance, so substantive indeed. The public wants to know, wants more than just being informed, but also to see the opinions channeled into decision making with clear responsibilities at the end. A long-term substantive dialogue, information sharing, and involving the public in decision making can really build trust, lessen fears and suspicions connected with radioactive waste management. The transparency and engaging in dialogue are not closed-end issues, but they must continue and reach future generations as well. One last point I would like to mention before I close is the issue of knowledge. So what I mean here is knowledge as a common ground for open debate. So knowledge is transparent sharing of information, of data, of processes. Knowledge is meant also as continuous research and innovation for solutions, and we have seen in the last few sessions clear examples and the increased attention to society. So, for example, the project like SITEX and URAD and others. Transparency largely relies on the objective information provided by science, but also both hard sciences and social sciences should provide facts, figures, and evidence for a better policy making and citizen-informed decisions. So again, I really like the chart in one of the previous panelists' presentations. Open science is the standard commission method for working under the research and innovation funding programs such as Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, where the European Commission requires beneficiaries of our funding to make their publications and data available in open access. And this means that we provide online access to scientific information that is free of charge for the users. The Euratom research program, which we support and will continue to support their biotechnological and socioeconomic activities in the context of the next multi-annual financial framework, which has just started a few weeks ago. And several Euratom research projects dealing with stakeholders and citizens' engagement in the field of nuclear and radioactive waste management were presented also at this conference. So the Modern 2020, Honest, SITEX, EOPRAD, and specific attention was also devoted to the URAD, European Joint Program on Radioactive Waste Management. So I'm going to stop here to give the floor to the next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Petrovičová. Among the many important issues that you have raised, I pick up this very problematic question of maintaining, because we are struggling to find new patterns of involvement of civil society and developing procedures. But the question of maintaining this for many, many years is a real issue. And also this could be, I think, an issue in itself, because we are only emerging with new patterns, with new ideas, with possibilities. And now comes the question of maintaining this over a very long time. So now I will come to Mrs. Cromnier, that we are very glad we welcome in this roundtable. Mrs. Cromnier is representing ENSREG, the group of nuclear regulator at European level. She's herself General Director of SSM in Sweden, the regulator for radiation and safety. And so, Mrs. Cromnier, would you bring your views here in the debate, and according to what you've heard, according to your experience in your country and the roundtable we had yesterday about Sweden, can you give your views and also connecting with the reflections of Nzreg?
as already said, I'm the Director General of the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority since June 2019, and I'm also a member of ENSREG, and it's in this capacity that I will be focusing my talk today. And I will talk a little bit about ENSREG in general, and then I will also go into more the work of ENSREG in the field of information and public participation in particular. So ENSREG is an advisory body to the European Commission, and it consists of the heads of the nuclear regulators of the European Union and some other countries, and there are also some observers outside of the EU in this group. The group is a high-level group that was formed in 2007, and it's not a regulating body, it's rather an advisory body, but this body can of course provide guidance on interpretation of the EU directives in the field of nuclear safety and spent fuel and radioactive waste. This group is working under a work program that is biannual, and a new one for the years 2021 to 2023 is in progress, and I will give you some more information about what has been done in the last 2 years of ENSREG. So next slide, please. So the basic fundamental principle of ENSREG is to facilitate continuous improvement in nuclear safety, and also striving for continuous improvement in the area of nuclear safety as such. And the scope of ENSREG thus mirrors the EU directives, nuclear safety directive dealing with the safety of nuclear installations, and also the safety and management of spent fuel and radioactive waste. And ENSREG has also in the past years also been involved in assisting neighboring countries to the EU in executing stress tests in similar matter that has been done for the EU member states past in the times after the Fukushima Daiichi accident in 2011. So the role of ENSREG is really to help establish conditions for continuous improvements and facilitate reaching common understandings in these areas between the different members of ENSREG. In all its work, of course, improving cooperation and openness between the member states is a key task for ENSREG, and also improving the overall transparency on nuclear safety and radioactive waste are key issues that are dealt with within ENSREG. And also giving advice to the European Commission on the need for additional rules in the field within ENSREG's mandate. Next slide, please. ENSREG has organized its work in and has 3 working groups that are all reporting back to ENSREG. ENSREG as a group has meetings twice a year, and the working groups are of course continuously working also in between these meetings, and they report back to the ENSREG general group at each of the meetings. So there's one working group dealing with improving nuclear safety arrangements. That's working group 1. There's another working group dealing with improving radioactive waste management, spent fuel and decommissioning arrangements. That's working group 2. And the one working group 3, which might be the one that's of most interest to this group and this conference, is the working group on improving in transparency arrangements. And this working group is really dealing with is a cross-cutting function, and it deals with openness and transparency in both of these EU directives, the one on nuclear safety and the one on spent fuel and radioactive management.
what has been done then in the working group and ENSREG regarding transparency and public participation in the past 2 years? The ENSREG has just recently developed a communication strategy, which has been published on the ENSREG website at the end of 2020. And also, ENSREG has updated a guidance for national regulatory organizations on the principle, how to deal with principles of openness and transparency. And this update was, it started with a study that was done in 2019 with a study on how these transparency and openness principles had been met by the different national regulatory authorities. And according to this study, at that point in time, 80%, I'll just give you a few figures and numbers. I'm not going to give you the full conclusions here, but 80% of the national regulatory organizations had developed communication strategy. Also, 80% had a target or policy on timelines for disclosure of information. 95% had plans for communication of aspects of emergency responses, and 73% published regulatory decisions that were taken in the regulatory organization. 90% published an annual report, and 81% identified key stakeholders. But the study also concluded that there is a common understanding of the importance of openness and transparency among the national regulatory organizations, but at the same time, there's room for more proactivity in engaging with media and other stakeholders, and also room for increased use of online communication in the communication with the public. So with that as a background, ENSREG then has developed and updated its guidance for national regulatory authorities, and this guidance is also now published on the ENSREG website, and it contains 9 best practice areas. These best practice areas, they really go beyond the legislative requirements in the legislation. So this is really to be seen as what can you do to be really at the front. And these 9 areas, let me see, they are, I will just go through them quite quickly. To promote a culture of openness and transparency within the regulators is one area. The second area, to develop a policy or strategy for communication. Third one is to develop an appropriate toolkits for effective communication with the public and other interested parties. Number 4 is produce an annual report. Number 5, communicate effectively and proactively with interested parties in a timely manner. The 6th one is communicate effectively with the media. The 7th one, produce information in plain language. The 8th one is when developing documents, consider in advance which information might be sensitive. And 9th area is to evaluate the effectiveness of the regulator's communication. So within these areas, there are descriptions of possible ways to further elaborate the interaction with the public and information sharing. And just to, since the work program for the next coming years, 2021 to 2023, is not yet decided upon, but there are some draft ideas. There is to, of course, continue with the ENSREG conferences, which have been held over the years in a more open context, and also there's some suggestions to continue to redesign the website, making even more easily accessible, and to look also into the coming topical peer review, the second one, to see how to involve the public in that also. So I can think that finishes what I had planned to say, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cromnier, for this comprehensive review of the area of interest of ENSREG vis-à-vis transparency. Now I will quickly move and give the floor to Mr. Jakop Dalunde, representative of the European Parliament, member of the European Parliament in this new parliament, but also since 2016, representing the Green Group in the European Parliament. And would you be kind enough, Mr. Dalunde, to bring your views in this debate from a specific perspective of the Parliament? To what extent could the Parliament contribute to further expand this practical implementation of the Aarhus Convention in the nuclear sector, in the radioactive waste management?
We are right now at a very crucial moment for the future existence of nuclear power, as renewables are quickly and rapidly pulling away the carpet beneath the feet of nuclear power. And there's really an opportunity now to make sure that we really take another route forward when it comes to our energy supply. However, there is a risk that during this very spring, there will be another window open for nuclear power in terms of having it within the taxonomy. And there is also a window of opportunity for nuclear power when it comes to hydrogen. And both of these issues will now be discussed importantly during the spring and during this mandate. During this mandate, I will do my utmost to make sure that we handle these issues that shuts these windows for nuclear power in the future. On this very topic that you now have been discussing, it's not the area of nuclear power policy that I have been involved in too much. So I have listened very attentively to the knowledge of these experts, and I will not try to say something wiser than I actually am. So I will refrain to say too much, but to my previous colleague who is also involved on the transparency issues, I will do my best to make sure that they have more funding and are capable of continuing their work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dalunde. I guess you will have some opportunities to come back in the debate with questions. Thank you for being quick, as we are running a little bit out of time. I will now pass the floor to Valéry Detilleux from Bellevay. Valéry has presented yesterday the SITEX network, and I guess he will be able today to bring back and to, let's say, articulate this reflection of the nuclear safety expert with this question of transparency.
So the idea here is to give some views about how to improve the existing arrangements on information and public participation in the field of radioactive waste management. And to do that, I thought it's maybe a good idea for me to look back at the SITEX initiative and to try to see what that initiative brought to me. So I will try to do that in 3 slides. So first of all, what was my general feeling at the start of the SITEX initiative? And I think it was also the feeling of several of my TSO colleagues. So we asked us to have some dialogues with the civil society within the SITEX project. It was really a first project for me. And I thought, oh, on what should I exchange with civil society. They are not experts and they will not understand me. And also, I thought such exchanges will be quite time consuming and will not change my work and safety evaluation. So what is the added value? Also, I thought that at the end, it's the regulatory body who will assess the safety and not the civil society. So why should I take some time for exchange with them? But I was interested, and let's say it was worth to try. And then I think it's also useful to give some. I felt also some reactions from the civil society at the beginning, when we have had some exchanges during the first SITEX project with civil society organization. We heard some message like, if I start discussing with TSOs, then I may give the impression that I endorse all the ongoing project, that I accept waste disposal, that I accept everything. And we heard also, I do not want that TSO use that dialogue, use us, to then say the project are agreed with civil society. So it was interesting because there were really some fears on the both sides that this may not be really useful, or that there are some dangers in discussing with the other part. So I think it was a global feeling at the beginning of the SITEX project. We felt there was something to do, but we had some fears about that. And now I would like to say what is now the perception at the end of the SITEX project, and at the I would say the current perception, because we have now built a network, so it was successful, let's say. About on what should that exchange with civil society, we found it's possible to exchange about the R&D results and their possible implication for safety. We found it's really possible to discuss even technically with some of their experts. And it's also possible to exchange about safety assessment results. We can present that, we can discuss that together, explain why we think something is safe. And we can also discuss about possible safety concerns. That's, for example, what we did when we have built the SITEX strategic research agenda during the SITEX 2 project. And we found that such exchanges, we thought that such exchanges will be time consuming, as I say, and maybe without any added value. I can say that I have now a complete different view, and I know a lot of my colleagues have the same view now. It changed a lot of work, and it helps in fact to really to step back and to look at safety issues with more perspective, because you are obliged to explain what you do, and then you are obliged to explain this sometimes in basic terms, and it forces you to put the things in perspective and to think more sometimes more carefully and more deeply about your job and your safety positions. So it may give new ideas and a new point of view. And so I think the perception now, for me and for my colleagues, is that it's something really useful that is an added value. Concerning the points, at the end, it is the regulatory body who will assess the safety and not the civil society organization. So why should I take some time for exchanging with them? I think I can say that now the perception is the following. This allows to develop confidence, trust between the actors. And it's really necessary to have such trust. And we did not lose our independence of mission. I mean, we are still able to perform our task as TSO, supporting the regulatory body. It's not because we have a dialogue with the civil society that we are no more TSO. Something important is that we are not forced to agree. And it's maybe, how to say that, evident, but at the beginning, I think it was one of the biggest fear. It was that maybe we are forced to agree together. And I think we have discovered that it's also very important to dialogue, to exchange, because it allows to understand the position of the civil society or of the TSO. And if we have that exchange, if we understand the position of the others, then we are able to put our work in perspective. And so we are not always forced to agree, to have a consensus, but at least we are able to understand each other, and it's something I think really important to increase the safety and to enrich our work. Why I say that building trust can increase the safety? Also because if we have such, as I said, such understanding of each other, then we have a kind of plural dimension with different point of views, and it's important for safety to have different point of view. If you work only in with colleagues that have the same meaning of you, the same perception as you, then it's not good for the safety, I think. And also because if you build trust, then I think you will more quickly evolve toward what you could call and we call that safe terminus in SITEX, so a safe solution. You will quickly evolve towards a safe solution and in a more sustainable way. If you do not have that trust, you will build something, and then everything will stop because there is no confidence, no trust, and then you have a safety issue because you have no more solution. So you can see that those SITEX projects have changed my mind and that of several of my colleagues. So what are some my recommendations for improving again this link between TSOs and civil society? So globally, in the positive return of experience, I think we should continue to develop and strengthen these dialogues and interaction in future projects, and that's why we are trying to do within EURAT, for example. I think the CSO participation should not be limited to a passive review of deliverables, so information or just, should be more than that. Also, they should not, we should not limit the participation of CSO to the attendance of some meeting where we disseminate some results. It's not that, we have to go beyond that. It should consist, I think, in active and constructive dialogues, among others, about the meaning of project results. And the different kinds of actors do not necessarily need to find a common meaning, a common position. But as I said, at least they should understand what the different meaning positions are. And that's what is very enriching, I think, for the safety. The R&D project could just, I think, be more systematically completed with specific tasks aiming at exchanging with CSO, so civil society organization, about the meaning of the results of the project and considering the point of view of civil society organizations. I think it's really a way to strengthen the safety, and it's in line with the Aarhus Convention. And I think that, as I presented during my presentation yesterday, I think SITEX network can help to do that, and it is developed really in that vision. Thanks. That was what I would like to share with you today.
Thank you very much, Valéry. Thank you for this important witness that you bring. I think that in parallel to your question, shall I discuss with why should I discuss with civil society organization? I guess it's the same on the other side. Why should I spend time to discuss with experts? And I guess there are also growing expectation and interest into this type, although there is a behind question of sustainability, and that's why I think it's all the more important that we have tried to bring as partners at least some of these experts in the game. I think now we can move to the last intervention. Mrs. Goebel, representing EGD-TP, that means the implementers, the operators in the game. So we are very glad to have you on board. So Astrid, I think you are yourself from Germany, from BGE, and with a long background in the field. So I will not say more, and I will give you immediately the floor.
Yes, it's my pleasure to contribute to this discussion today as representative of the IGD-TP. BGE is one member of 12 of the executive group, and I'd like to underline that these statements and the slides are based on discussions with my colleagues in the group and contributions from Irina Gauss as chair and Tamara Baldwin from IGD-TP's secretariat. So next slide, please. Well, the IGD-TP has been launched in year 2009. Now, in these days, it is solely funded by the 12 members of the executive group. The idea was to facilitate the stepwise implementation of safe, deep geological disposal of spent fuel, high-level waste, and other long-lived radioactive waste. There is a strong focus on implementing oriented research, development, and demonstration, but IGD-TP is open for all interested parties that endorse our vision and that are willing to contribute positively and constructively. So currently we have 142 members. Next slide, please. Our first vision 2025, was to have the first geological disposal facilities for spent fuel, high-level waste, and other long-lived waste by 2025 in operation. Well, as in taking into consideration the major progress Posiva, SKB, and ANRA have made, we hopefully will achieve very soon our vision 2025. So next slide, please. So we thought it was time to move forward, and in 2019, the year of IGD-TP's 10th birthday, we developed and agreed on a new vision 2040. Towards industrialization of radioactive waste disposal in Europe. There are three guiding ideas: safely operation of the first geological disposal facilities, optimization and industrialization of planning, construction, and disposal operations, and recognizing that there are diverse waste inventories in Europe, towards development of tailored solutions. Well, IGD-TP is offering a forum for discussion, identifying common interests, and sharing RD&D information and experiences. What are the targeted and expected benefits? We want to reach competence building, joint work and use of resources, joint work on strategies, and knowledge transfer. In consideration of the new vision 2040, a dedicated IGD-TP working group updated the strategic research agenda. It was published in the last year, 2020. This agenda identifies main RD&D issues that we think should be coordinated in order to realize our vision. We defined with this 9 key topics, and there is one key topic: waste forms and their behavior, taking, for example, up legacy waste. And we have taken up key topic monitoring and knowledge management. So for the key topics, then next slide, please. Well, this is just giving an overview of the maturity of the different European disposal programs, as the implementers have seen it. And this served us as basis for setting the RD&D needs into context of the disposal program phases. This was helping when thinking of priorities and to get an idea what should be more networking and transfer of existing knowledge, recognizing that after decades of research, we have already achieved a lot of knowledge and state of the art. Yeah, to have an outlook on future activities, we are looking forward to promoting collaboration and knowledge transfer, in particular addressing implementer, to supporting international collaboration to avoid duplication and identify synergies, to ensuring continuity throughout the long time scales, transfer of best practice and lessons learned, to ensuring expertise and necessary facilities to be able to remain state-of-the-art. And we are looking forward to contributing the implementer's view to guide the focus of activities over the next decades. Well, now I want to come to some key messages. We think successful repository implementation needs the legal framework with the roles of each party clearly described as implementers, regulators, and society. It needs to be set out and accepted by all parties how to implement the repository program and conduct the site selection. We think a long-term political commitment is required. Without this, it has proven extremely difficult to develop and maintain an adequate RD&D program. Where these conditions have not been fulfilled, several programs have gone to a hold or even restart phase. This challenges the RD&D program and setting priorities, and we are convinced that international collaboration is an instrument to bridge this, but we see the risk and maybe think a loss of knowledge is almost inevitable. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to the following discussion.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Now we can go directly to debate. We have, let's say, something like 25 minutes to discuss. I think that there are many interesting questions in the chat, in the quick Q&A area. In addition, there is also a question brought on telephone, and I bent on starting with one of the questions on telephone, which is for Mrs. Petrovičová. It is regarding the setting of a question from Jean-Claude Autrey, the question of the elaboration of the directive and the role of civil society there. It seems that there is a kind of a frustration regarding the way, let's say, the powerful lobbies participate to the framing of those directives. And how do you see the question of civil society participation in this elaboration of the regulatory framework? Mrs. Petrovičová. It is part of the big landscape we proposed this morning with all the different levels of interaction, but definitely there is an issue there. So how do you see it?
Thank you very much for the question. So indeed, I have just double-checked the wording in the directive, which I think it was referred to in one of the presentations. So the key article is Article 10. Which foresees, the only part of the stakeholder landscape that has any specific role other than member states having to ensure that this is put in their framework is the competent regulatory authority, which, and I'm quoting now, which needs to inform the public in the fields of its competence. So we're talking about radioactive waste management. So, I grant you the point that it's open enough that the information, for example, I keep quoting, shall be made available to the public in accordance with national legislation and international obligations, which is relatively open. So, and we've mentioned this in another panel, I can't remember which one, that we have in different member states, different needs for the level of transparency, and possibly also within the member states, not everybody is interested in the same depth of information as others. So we in this event, many of us are experts in the field, and so we understand the concepts far in depth, whereas other citizens might be interested in other aspects or maybe not the same information in depth. As you might know, the directives, the way that they are proposed, it's the usual legislative process under the RATOM directives, is that the Commission proposes legislative text, which then is discussed and needs the agreement of Council, which is member states. I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you very much. There are some interest in more information, Jakop, on the question of the categorization or let's say the taxonomy about the agenda and the next steps there. Maybe I leave it to you to have a look to the Q&A. But before, maybe I would like to go back to Professor Ebbesson. I don't see him. Are you still with us? Yes, you're with us. There are two, let's say, side questions. One is about the question of plutonium, is posed by David Lowry. And there are also a side question about the Aarhus Convention and the COVID crisis and the possibility for the public to take advantage of the COVID crisis. So would you like to have a word on this? And I will go back to Jan Haverkamp because there is a strange question brought by Rebecca. I guess it's Rebecca Harm about, let's say, she seems reluctant to go back to the wounds of the past. And since in your first slide, you brought this idea of keeping in mind the past and the failures. So could you maybe bridge the gap with this question? So Mr. Ebbesson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So as regards fissile material, of course, I will not expand on the science about that because I'm ignorant, but to the extent that they are declared or will be declared as nuclear waste, then apparently the convention is fully applicable, as you have seen and as I have mentioned. But even if certain material would not be classified as nuclear waste, there are still entries into the convention where the provisions for public participation also apply. Well, access to information and access to justice would apply regardless of classification. And as regards public participation, if there are national requirements about environmental impact assessments, then the party concerned should ensure public participation no matter how you qualify that. There is also another entry, and that is if the decision-making concerning this material and the management of those wastes may have significant effect on the environment, then the convention can also be triggered. So it wouldn't, in that sense, depend on the classification. But of course, there are clear requirements with respect to nuclear activities and radioactive nuclear waste. So it may have some impact. And in that context, I think there was also a question, Mr. Chair, if I'm not wrong, about the possibility of excluding activities from the Aarhus Convention by classifying them as military activities. And just to be very brief, there are no such possibilities of excluding activities from being subject to the convention just by naming or declaring them military or so. It may matter with respect to access to information, whether it is in the context of military activities, of course, when disclosure. Then the question about COVID-19, and if I may ask for 2 seconds, show a screen. I think this is a very good opportunity to do so. The Compliance Committee adopted earlier this year a statement concerning the application of the Aarhus Convention during the COVID-19 pandemic and also during the economic recovery phase. And I advise you to look at that. It is available at the committee's website. And in the specific question now, if I recall rightly, when looking very briefly at it, it was about 2 different interests. One was the pushing for very quick participation, and the other one was the concern that during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's difficult to carry out public participation. And key point here is that the convention does not allow in any way for reducing the rights in the convention, and the parties concerned are even more I would say under the duty to make sure that there are provisions to deal with the convention, even if you change certain routines and procedures. And it may mean that the processes may be allowed to take some more time for that reasons in some cases. In other cases, of course, a party or a company cannot delay participatory processes in order to avoid public participation just by referring to the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think the key message, Mr. Chair, is that the convention applies in full. There is no way to really reduce it. The parties may find other ways. They may have to expand the time for comments and make practical arrangements to do so to ensure the minimum rights, but they cannot avoid the duties by reference to the pandemic or to economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will give the floor to maybe Jan, if you want to pick the remark of Rebecca. But before, I would like also to pick a question from Marie-Excel Martel to the IGD-TP. And she is questioning the fact that the SRA of IGD-TP doesn't include any social science. And I guess this is a real question. All the more your conclusion underlined the fact that, according to you, the main problems are not the technical one, although if there is no technical problem, one could wonder the Commission will spend, together with the state, 70 million € to solve technical problems. But at the same time, I would like to, together with Marie-Excel, I would like to question a little bit, if you think that the problems are in the area of society, why is it that you don't address this question? So I think a little bit, I pass the floor to Jan.
Thanks, Gilles. Rebecca, I think I largely agree with you that we've seen in Germany a lot of development lately. But I was referring more to the other countries. I think it's a lesson that we should also learn from Germany, where the reality of the past was having a large effect on the entire discussion. And it's a lesson that doesn't seem to have been learned in countries like the Czech Republic or like the UK, or even France and Belgium. And I think that lesson there is something that really warrants more discussion. And concerning the plutonium issue and military, I'm very much willing, David, to work further with you on this, because I think it's indeed very important that we see on this edge of military use of nuclear and civil use of nuclear, that the application of the Aarhus Convention is a challenging issue, and that so far we haven't taken up the challenge yet as civil society, which in the end, in 10 years or so, means that Jonas Ebbesson probably will see me again in Geneva discussing this very issue.
Thank you, Jan. Before giving the floor to Astrid, I also would like to mention to Mrs. Cromnier that there are several questions, but they are a little bit coming back to the floor of Sweden and SSM role. So could you have a look to those questions and maybe encapsulate a kind of answer? Astrid, there is also additional question which come on the floor that you could also answer. Yesterday, we touched the problem of the sensitivity of commercial information, or let's say private structure, and the difficulty for the stakeholders to access information, for instance, in Sweden, as the operator is private. So this is a question of David Laurie. How could we solve this? And also maybe there is a question on to what extent would the implementers play the game of transparency? What is the real intention? I must say that from your presentation, it was not completely obvious for me because you focus very much on technical issues, and it seems that you see as an external problem, there's an externality for you, the question of society. Although one could also think that the issues are, in the end of the day, are not technical on the one hand and social on the other hand, but more social technical. Safety is a purely social technical issues that you cannot address only with technical aspect. But maybe I give you the floor, please.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, yes, you're right. We recognize that it is a social issue, the implementation of the disposal program. IGD-TP is very strongly focused on RD&D issues. And furthermore, we just focus on key topics that we have identified where it is really needed to have a joint coordination. So the benefit would be of the members and of the IGD-TP to coordinate the future actions and workshops for these issues. And well, I was member of this working group for the update of the research agenda. So of course we discussed and discuss. I mean, we have an exchange and the networking social issues, but I think well, finally the decision was not to take it up in our as a key topic in our strategic research agenda for our joint actions and the networking, because we regard this to be quite country and program specific. And we want to recognize that it is absolutely crucial for the implementation of the program. But yes, we have decided not to take it up in our research agenda for our networking and our joint actions and projects. So this would not mean that we are not ready to support joint programs as in ENERD. I mean, there are, of course, members of the IGD-TP engaged in cooperative projects, but we have not put it up or taken it up for our networking. And once to make this really to underline it, the research agenda of the IGD-TP has not the idea to be kind of comprehensive. We have not the goal to define all needed all research needs. It's not a comprehensive view. It's just something, it's our agenda. These are topics that the IGD-TP members want to take up and think that we take really added value and benefit from joint coordination. I hope this makes it a little bit more clearer for you. Yes. And the second question, well, this is a big issue. Oh, you just wanted directly to give a comment, Mr. Ebbesson, I think. Shall I go on or shall we just, okay.
Mr. Ebbesson, you wanted to add something precisely on this point? Go on, please. I will come back to you, Astrid.
No, I wait. Please, Astrid will continue. And if I may come back after her, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right.
Yes. Well, this is really a big issue for BGE and Germany right now. But I think how to deal with the property rights is this is really a regulator issue and is country specific. This is my German view on this. So there is no, we would exchange on such important issues, but there is no joint message from the IGD-TP regarding how to deal with property rights on data and information.
Yes, this point was raised several times during the 3 days, and notably regarding the question of copper corrosion in Sweden and the fact that apparently part of the available data and information are, let's say, property of SKB. I guess it's also a reason why civil society has interest to see also those questions being addressed at EU level, because then it becomes public and it's a bit different. Jonas, would you like to add a word?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was indeed on that very question that I wanted to comment, and I'm happy to do so also in response to Astrid Goebel's point. We have looked at intellectual property rights in some cases in the committee, but I think this is something which would, I think, require also broader discussions. But generally speaking, the Aarhus Conventions, first of all, I should say that also private entities could be subject to the obligations under the Aarhus Conventions if they act as public authorities, if they have certain public responsibilities and functions in relation to the environment. And of course, energy companies could very well amount to public authorities in that respect, generally speaking. Then when it comes to intellectual property rights, I think one has to understand what intellectual property right is about. It usually is not about making things public or not. It is whether or not to commercialize it or use it in economic senses. We had these discussions, for instance, also during the ratification of the Aarhus Convention. There were quite a few methodological institutes, including the one in Sweden, that was concerned that it would have to provide data on meteorological or hydrological issues. And they were concerned about intellectual property. We have had one case where a country argued that the environmental impact assessments should not be made publicly available for intellectual property reasons. And I think that is based on a misconception. It is one thing that I can request the information from a public authority to look at it, to use it in my, say, engagement for an environmental issue. It's a completely different thing that I'm not allowed to publish that, commercialize that, without the consent of the owner. So also, even though there is a provision in Article 4 of the Aarhus Convention concerning refused access to environmental information that refers specifically to intellectual property rights, I think one has to keep this in mind, that you should show that it adversely affects the intellectual property rights. And I would say that just by showing certain data doesn't adverse the intellectual property right as such. It may have an impact on the certain confidentialities in relation to an industrial activity. There may be safety reasons not to disclose certain information, but I think intellectual property reasons is much less than what people might think would be a reason not to disclose it. So I think this is based on a misconception, but I think this also is something that would be useful to discuss more generally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Cromnier, maybe you can address the questions that are in the Q&A, and also you can bring a view about this question from the EPN, from ENSREG perspective, the question of private operators and the question of accessibility of data.
Well, I guess if you want me to take the floor on this, the accessibility of data of private entities, of course, that is a tricky question. There is always some data that are not available due to the competitive situation of the companies, etc. But of course, that is, and the legislation as such is regarding open data, and there's always a balance to strike between the two dimensions, as has already also been discussed earlier. But the legislation as such is, at least a Swedish situation, it is the public organizations that are required to submit information and so on. And when somebody is asking for information by an authority, we are looking into the specific issue, and we are dispersing as much information from it as we possibly can. But that is something that is done on a case-by-case basis, where we look into what is the actual document containing, and we are dispersing as much as possible from that document. So I think that's really what I could say about this subject at the moment. And I am looking into the questions and answers just to, but I'm also sorry to say that I'm not a specialist in all the fields, which means that I cannot answer all the questions without consultations with my colleagues in the authority, and some of the questions I would have to come back to at a later stage after having such consultations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cromnier. Jakop, are you with us? Because there is a sort of a very much kind of interest, and maybe you could update a little bit on this question of next opportunities or next windows of opportunities for discussing the role of nuclear energy in the Green Deal and the taxonomy issue. How do you see the landscape there?
So there are many colleagues in the European Parliament who are very interested in pushing for inclusion of nuclear power in the taxonomy, and for that to be viewed as sustainable investments, very much in conjunction with nuclear power being used to have hydrogen. Those two issues are quite linked. And I know that in some member states, there are discussions in governments to support the very same thing. So I think it's a battle that we will hopefully win, at least in terms of the taxonomy, but I'm very, very worried of nuclear power having its resurgence as energy source in hydrogen. We need to do some good work during the spring and this year to make sure that this doesn't happen, and to mobilize support for continued exclusion of nuclear power in both the taxonomy and as a sustainable source for hydrogen. As you know, currently 99% of all hydrogen is fossil based, but at the same time it is viewed as the silver bullet to solve many issues, both in trucks for cargo transport, for aviation, for maritime transport, in the industry sector. There are lots of prospects on increasing the use of hydrogen, and many of my colleagues are very interested in using nuclear power as a source for the production of hydrogen.
Thank you very much. I would like to finish. I can see Jan wants to say a word, or are you talking to somebody else?
No. I would like to shortly react on this. I mean, the taxonomy issue is going on. The TRC will come with a report, probably this or next month, to show also whether the radioactive waste issue is one of the aspects that fulfills or not fulfills the do no harm principle for the taxonomy. Together with Jakop and other members of the European Parliament, Nuclear Transparency Watch will organize a seminar about this on the 14th of April. So you can already put that into your agenda.
Thank you. I would like to have a word of Valéry Detilleux. I see some very enthusiastic comments on your presentation from Belgium stakeholders, but I would like to have your views on the main challenge, because in fact you gave a very interesting feedback of the way you experience this interaction with stakeholders, and the way in fact you see them as an asset for improving safety. So how would you see the key difficulties? Why is it that it's not obvious for everybody?
You mean in Belgium, or?
No, in general.
Okay, in general.
As a SITEX network, I think when we see your presentations, I say presentations, there was another one yesterday, it becomes obvious that in fact interacting with society is a way to improve the safety. It's not, as I said this morning, a cherry on the cake. It's really it's not to approve nuclear activities. But it's really to make solid decisions and to complement the work of the people in charge already. Yeah. So how do you see the difficulties? Why is it that it takes so much time to make it obvious for everybody that it's an important aspect?
My answer would be that, and it's associated maybe to the first feeling I had when I started Scientix, that sometimes we think that if we dialogue with civil society, if dialogue together, it's because they want to impose something. They have a view, and that we have to and that we have to listen what they have to say, and we are obliged to do something, a solution, an idea that comes from civil society. But I think it's not that, and a lot of persons, I think, are feared of that discussion, because they think it will force them to do something, and they know maybe better what is which design is safer and so on. But I think we have to go beyond that. If we stop there, we have some fears, and then we do not want to dialogue. I think we should understand that having a dialogue is just understanding the point of view of the others. And if we are then able to understand the point of views of the others, then we have a more a larger perspective, and then it allows us then to think differently, I think, and to move maybe towards some different ideas, and this is what is an asset for the safety, I think. I think that some persons think that we have to listen to others because they will bring a brilliant idea, and that this idea has to be implemented because this idea will be safer. I think it's not that. I think that the idea to have the dialogue, to put different people together, and it's really the process of explaining what you are doing, of listening to the other points of view, that increases safety. It's not the fact that there are some ideas that will come. It's really the process of discussing, of opening the mind, and that increases safety. And I think when I have understood that, then I was convinced of the added value. And maybe some organization have still to understand that. Or
isn't it that we should maybe propose a kind of update of the safety culture definition of INSAC 4? What do you think?
Maybe, but I think safety culture, according to me, it's a big part of safety culture is to have an interrogative behavior. I mean, to have a questioning attitude, and it's what I want to say. I mean. You are not. The idea is not that you will receive some safer solution that you will have to implement. No, the idea is just to be open-minded and to have a questioning attitude. So I think it's already part of the definition of the safety culture.
This is something we should openly discuss with regulators. And for instance, in the SITEX 2 project, the one who wanted to improve the safety culture definition was FONC, precisely. So maybe we have something to work out with ENSREG there. Let's see. Let's put it as a challenge for the coming years.
Nice, new challenge. Always welcome.
Very good.